Hello, dear friends. I'm recording this Erev Yom Kippur of the year 5782 in the Hebrew calendar. And this is Mishnah of Pirkei Avot, chapter 2, Mishnah 15. The last two Mishnayot of chapter 2 are sayings of Rabbi Tarfon. Now, this by itself is interesting because if you remember, until now, there were the sayings of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and five of his distinguished students, as I said, not only his only students. And they made statements, and then all of a sudden the chapter ends with Rabbi Tarfon, who is not one of those five. The question is why? Well, some people, like the Kahati, write that Rabbi Tarfon was also a student of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, which is very possible. But why? Why him? And since Rabbi Tarfon was a very distinguished name at that time, why wasn't he one of the six? Meaning, why weren't there six? Why were there specifically five? So others think that Rabbi Tarfon was a scholar even before the destruction of the temple, and even before Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the head of Kerem B'Yavne, and therefore he was both, you might say, a colleague and a student. So in that sense, he wasn't a regular student of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and therefore it wouldn't have been appropriate to put him among the students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. But he is included at the end because since we're talking about the sort of like heads of that generation, remember it starts with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, but then it goes back to Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was a student of Hillel, and continues again until Yochanan ben Zakkai and his students. So Rabbi Tarfon probably being colleague and a student, it seemed appropriate to include him in this chapter. In next chapter, another colleague of Rabbi Tarfon will be Rabbi Akiba, but I'm assuming Akiba might have been a little bit younger than Rabbi Tarfon. Now, normally in Pirkei Avot, I think I've mentioned before that we have all these sayings and the names of people, and you're wondering, did they all have sayings? Was that a Jewish thing that everybody had a saying and that you could make a whole Pirkei Avot based on that? And usually I explain that the idea was to take something which would sort of like summarize their teachings in a way that people who knew them would remember them by these things. And not necessarily that this is something they went around saying all the time. However, in the case of Rabbi Tarfon, the two statements really sound like statements that he would say, because they're not regular ways of summarizing the words of somebody or the ideas of someone. Take, for instance, this Mishnah itself, number 15. Rabbi Tarfon said, Hayom Katzar, the day is short. Hamlachar Meruba, there's lots of work to do. Ha-po'alim atzelim, the workers are lazy. Ha-sachar harbe, there's lots of reward. Balabait dochek, and you might say, well, Balabait could be the employer. The employer is pushing. The head of the household is pushing, meaning, of course, God. But obviously the statement, which is an analogy, which is a metaphor, really sounds like a statement that somebody might say, because it's not a regular type of way of summarizing ideas of somebody. Now, what does it mean? Okay, so some people, like the Kati, explain like this: the day is short, meaning life is short. Hamlacha meruba, lots of work to do, meaning lots of Torah to study. Hapoalim atzelim. The people, the workers, are the people themselves. We tend to be lazy because we look for other things of enjoyment in life and not necessarily spend our times with the significant things. Hasachar harbe, there's lots of reward because the reward for Torah is endless, and they bring psukim for this. Ubalabait dochek, and God tries to push us forward. The way he interprets this one is that basically God commands us and tells us to study Torah. So basically, this interpretation makes it all about the study of Torah. Now, I had mentioned in the past that in the Second Temple period, there is a movement of democratization of the study of Torah. Originally, the Kohanim were the ones who were the teachers of Torah. And of course, the Sanhedrin itself eventually becomes members who are not Kohanim. Actually, Rabbi Tarfon himself happens to be a Kohen. And the 5 students mentioned before of Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, 2 of them are Kohanim. So there is still a dominant aspect of Kohanim among teachers. But little by little, you have non-Kohanim who also become famous rabbinic scholars in the second half of the Second Temple period, and of course, and also after the destruction of the temple, and probably more so after the destruction of the temple, because the Kohanim don't have the same prestige and place in Jewish life as they did during temple times. However, Rabbi Tarfon seems to be an exception, in the sense that if we were talking about the students and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai himself pushing the idea of Torah study as something which is going to now be the central part of Judaism instead of the temple and will keep the Jews together, Rabbi Tarfon is still of the feeling that it's the action of the mitzvot that are going to mold a person, a Jew. Now, he's not against scholarship, not in any sense of the word, but, and in fact, in the next Mishnah, he's going to say, he'll say specifically, if you study a lot of Torah, you're going to get a lot of reward. That's obvious. That's a sine qua non. You don't have to. But if you remember in the Talmud, there's an argument. What's more important, the study of Torah or mitzvot? What is more important, limud Torah or mitzvot? Or maaseh, or the actions of the Torah? Rabbi Tarfon takes the opinion that the actions, gadol maaseh, is greater. Meaning, despite the fact that Torah and the study of Torah is going to connect you to the Word of God, but we're living in a physical world here. This is where God placed us. So obviously, if God placed us here and He gave us actions to do the 613 commandments, that's the goal. Obviously, to keep the commandments, you need to study Torah, but the commandments cannot have a secondary value. Now, in the end, the Talmud comes to the conclusion: Gadol limud shemevi lidei maaseh. Great is the study that brings to practice. Of course, that by itself sounds like a paradox. If you say great is study that it brings to practice, so it sounds like a practice. But my point is that even before this conclusion, Rabbi Tarfon was the one who held the opinion that is the practice that is important. And this is the opinion of a great scholar in this generation. Meaning, if we take the people in general and look at Judaism, not everybody can be a scholar. They can be on different levels, but nobody can be a great scholar. So we have to emphasize practice because that's what changes this world, and people will be scholars according to their level. So it's an interesting perspective. And the perspective of Rabbi Tarfon, it seems that he lived his life this way. That practice for him, almost like I would say, it sort of reminds me of the Musar movement of 19th century Lithuania, of Israel Salanter, who in his yeshivot, where they're studying Torah, he wanted to push people to ethical practice. And Rabbi Tarfon was sort of that. There's a story told in the Tosefta that when there was a famine in the land of Israel, Rabbi Tarfon, of course, I said, was a Kohen, and he betrothed 300 poor women in order to allow them to eat from truma. Because if you're married to a Kohen, or if you're betrothed to a Kohen, what we call arusa in Hebrew, which is meaning you're connected to them, you're as if engaged from the Torah's point of view, not the way we do it today. Today we do both parts of the marriage ceremony under the marriage canopy, both erusin and nisuin. But even if you do erusin, even if you're betrothed to a Kohen and you cannot live with him yet, you can still eat from Truma. So he betrothed 300 women to allow them to eat 300 poor women during a famine so they could eat from the Truma, so they could have something to eat. So now this is a big thing, for somebody in the rabbinic world to do this. It both means that he cares about simple people, because most people say, what, for my name, I have to keep my good name. If I betroth 300 women, how are people going to talk about me? Okay, you didn't marry them, and it's still, how does it look? But Rabbi Tarfon was not, this didn't bother him. For him, the right thing is the right thing to do. It wasn't about your name, it's about, so if these 300 women can now eat truma from different people, this is, and it's going to save them. So what do I care what they're going to say about me? So this was a man of action too. It wasn't just somebody who believed that action in this world is important at mitzvah. So let's go back to this Mishnah. With that in mind, I want to reinterpret the Mishnah. I mean, reinterpret from the interpretation I gave you before. Rabbi Tarfon says, Hayom Katsar, meaning this world, meaning your world. Your world is, because life, of course, is limited. We can live, according to King David, 70 and with strength 80, and according to Genesis, 120. Kishagamu basar, yu yamad me'asrim shana. Right, we can live up to 120. Actually, in Tanakh, there's somebody who lived more than that. But basically, 120 seems to be. So even so, compared to the years of early Genesis, that seems to be nothing compared to Adam, compared to Methuselah, Metushelach, and Noach. Life is short then. But there's a lot to do. And I want to emphasize the mitzvot too. There's a lot of things that you can do in this world to improve the world. You can help people. You can change yourself. You can study Torah. You can keep the mitzvot. You can daven. You can do things which will improve your world and to benefit of all of mankind and the Jewish people and mankind. Hamlacham Ruba, there's really lots to do. And unfortunately, we don't always use these opportunities that we have at hand because we want to enjoy life, which is okay, by the way. But just make sure that you're able to accomplish those things that you have to accomplish in this world. Give it a precedent. There are those who went to the extreme, like the Vilna Gaon. You read his biography. He would count at the end of the year how many minutes he lost from the study of Torah. Not everybody's on that level, and usually it was not a lot. But in general, though, we all come to this world with abilities, and we have to use them. Hasachar harbe, there's a lot of reward. So if you need that incentive to think about it, use that incentive, but do it. Alabayit dochek, which means sometimes we run into obstacles that remind us that our end could be coming. Sometimes we have problems with health. Sometimes we have loved ones who have problems with health. Sometimes people close to us pass away. And of course, at one point in life, our parents will pass away. And of course, the way of the world is we want parents to pass away before the children and not vice versa. We'd rather it be the natural order of the world. All these things remind us that life is short. So yes, there's a Yushalmi, the Talmud Yushalmi says, in the world to come, one of the questions that will be asked the person is, did you enjoy this world according to what you were able to? And a lot of people wonder about that. That's the question they're going to ask. The answer is, this is the world of God. God gives us this world to do mitzvot, to make the world a better place. So we have to enjoy the world based on the way the Torah sees it. So yes. Now, some people, of course, will spend more time in the study of Torah, and some people less based on what their abilities are. So I always say, they will ask you that question, and you will answer it according to your character, which means those who are involved in mitzvot and things like that, they'll explain what they did. Those who were involved in Torah and moved a little bit away from this world, they'll explain why they enjoyed less because they needed to spend more time in Torah. It's just a question. The answer could be according to who you are. But the point is, the world itself is not a negative place. It's a beautiful place, but you can make it a beautiful place. It's it's neutral. You either make it beautiful or you make it ugly. And the way that you make it, that's what it's going to be. And that's how it will remain for the next generation, to either make it beautiful or make it ugly as well. And I wish everybody to be sealed in the book of life, all of us, the whole Jewish people, and may the very blessing for us and the world at large. Shalom